As you can see by the chaos behind me, I've been quite busy the last few months. This is I'm quite proud of myself of this, if I'm being honest with you. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining the connections between the characters and their plot lines throughout the season, as well as some of the supporting characters down here and how they play a role in the series. But the main 6 up here, as well as Moira, because Moira is not listed as a main character, although I feel that she definitely belongs here. She's definitely an honorary main character in my eyes. And then also on the right, I have the timeline. This video is, I have been planning this for about a year now, not just this show. I was going to do a video on the 100 at one point, but that kind of fell through. I still plan on doing that, but I just felt like this would be a whole lot easier. And then originally, up until about a few days ago, I was going to do this whole video as like a compilation of Murder House, Asylum, Coven, and Freak Show, and it was going to be the first 4 seasons in one video. But once I actually got into the thick of it and realized how long this video would be, I just decided to stick with this season, and then we're going to do Asylum, Coven, Freak Show all the way down to the very end later in their own videos. But I thought it would be much easier on me and much easier as a viewer, I guess, to digest just one season at a time. So that's what I'm doing. This video, like I said, took absolute ages to make, and I've had it in the works for a while. So whether this marks the beginning of a beautiful tradition or kind of fizzles out and doesn't do very well, remains to be seen. Also, just a few quick side notes before I explain everything else. As far as the timeline goes, I am going to be explaining it in the order of which the episode aired and not necessarily the order of which the event came in. So if the first scene takes place in 2011, then I'll be saying that scene first, and then I will be jumping back into 1968. I'm going by the episode in which the event took place in the episode, if that makes sense, and then I will explain like how it makes sense within the timeline. And I'll always give you the date before I explain like the event that took place that day. Over here on the character side, like I said, we have the main 6 characters, and then I have most of the supporting characters. There are a few that are not on here because I did not deem them important enough to be on here, such as Larry Harvey's daughters. They are not on here. Larry Harvey's wife, Lorraine, is on here. I didn't think the daughters were important enough. Also, there are a couple of others that I forgot and I'll bring up throughout the video, but just as an example, not everyone is up here. Also, don't shit on my drawing skills. I know that this does not look perfect, and that is okay. That is okay. Also, my taping abilities. Would glue have been easier? Probably, but I decided to use Scotch tape, and this, it's not perfect, I know. Just, this is the way it's going to be. So let me give you some background information into how the show came about before I kind of explain all of this behind me. The show was created by Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk in the fall of 2011. The idea for the show came about in either late 2010 or very early 2011 when Ryan Murphy was in his Glee era. He wanted to do something darker and less campy. He's always loved the horror genre, so he thought, you know, why not take a swing at it? And quite the swing he took, because this is iconic, and you can't deny that. The first few seasons of this show are genuinely fantastic, and once you get past, like, season 6, things kind of start to, like, spiral out of control a little bit. You know, that's what I'm here for. I'm gonna explain everything from this season all the way to Delicate, which comes out later in September. As of filming, this is August 30th, 2023. This isn't so much a review as it is a recap. Also, this video is heavily inspired by Mike's Mike and the incredible videos that he puts out. This whole format has been done before. I am not blind to that. This is heavily inspired by him, so I just wanted to put that in there. This season aired from October 2011 to December 2011, so a nice little fall/winter show. It definitely gave the fall/autumn vibes, and it was a huge success. Let's just be honest. This show broke out into the mainstream from basically season 1. The Tumblr girlies were eating everything up. The internet was taken by storm. The early internet was taken by storm by this man. But let's just get into the characters. Also, I'm filming this intro the day after I filmed most of this video, so if my hair looks different, don't comment on it. Up here at top, we've got Miss Vivian Harmon. She's a granola mom. She's very paranoid about, like, you know, in episode 1, we find out that she's very paranoid about, like, fabric softener and like all these different things, and she's very anti-chemical. She's very granola mom, she's very natural, she's very Nature Valley. She's giving very much yoga mom. You know the type. She's the Facebook is this all natural Karen mom. She slays for that. That's good for her. Here we have her husband, absolute flop, cheater, quite literally a hypocrite. He's a therapist who deals with his own problems, or I should say does not deal with his own problems, and instead just kind of tries to solve other people's instead of his own. Very much a flop. Don't like this character. Tomato, 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 tomato. We have their teenage daughter, Violet. We learn in the first episode that she's kind of just edgy, and that's like her whole character. She's not scared of anything. She's just basically described as a depressed teenager, which, like, girl, hello, we all are. You're not special. However, she is very smart in the ways of the house, and she starts to see, like, the heart of the house, the different ghosts and spirits that reside in the house first. And then we have Mr. Tate down here. Now, Mr. Tate, oh my goodness. Half of the fucking fandom is just absolutely obsessed with this man. And, we'll get into that. He is psychopathic, manipulative, and he has mommy issues. And that's all I have to say about him for now. Mother right here, this is Dame Miss Jessica Lange. She is playing a character called Constance. Babes, she's just a legend. She is just mother of the century. The only thing I have to say about her is that she is mother. That's really all I have to say. Larry Harvey, flop, actual weirdo. We'll find out in the first episode why. He's just no good. He's just really no good. I don't like him. He's creepy. He's gross. Supporting character down here, honorary main character, is Moira O'Hara. She, depending on which one you're talking about, is mysterious, sexual, very cheeky. She's very cheeky, let me just say that. Kind, warm-hearted, sweet, loving maid. Absolutely amazing. We love her. Pure of heart. Always wants to do what's best for the family, might I add. So some of the dynamics that we explore in this season between all of these main characters. So we have Ben and Vivian. They are married and they have recently hit a rough patch in their marriage. She caught him cheating in the first episode. This is kind of what sets the series in motion, and this is the reason why they move out to LA, because they are from Boston. Their daughter, Violet, is heavily affected by this, even though it's not really kind of stated. I think at this point is why she is upset, because she does not want to move out here. So Ben and Vivian are very argumentative. They don't always see eye to eye. In fact, they rarely see eye to eye. Ben is really manipulative with Vivian, and Vivian is just always here just serving her absolute best with her hair. Vivian and Violet have a strange relationship, sort of, because, again, I said she does not want to move out to LA, and Vivian and Ben have decided that this is the right step. She is resentful towards that. Then we have Vivian and Moira. Their relationship is more about, like, friends than employer and employee. Now, we also have Violet and Tate, and Krusty over here is manipulative, and she is just sad and needs a man, honestly, is what this is. Mr. Tate right here is just one of the reasons why this show has such a compelling narrative, and we'll get to that later. But this woman right here is just easily fooled, and I feel really bad for her, I really do, because this is Crust Lord. And then we have Tate and Ben. Benjamin is a therapist, and he begins seeing Tate in like day 4 or day 3 of the timeline. I don't exactly remember, but basically he is hired by Constance, who is Tate's mother, to fix his kind of homicidal tendencies, if you will. And yeah, so that's all you need to know about Tate and Ben, is it's a therapist and patient relationship. Then we have Ben and Larry, and Ben and Larry is a main storyline, I would say, for Ben, and at least for the first few episodes. Like, it's definitely a main thing until probably about halfway through the season. Larry wants to extort Ben for thousands of dollars, I believe it is, because Larry knows that Ben is a cheater. Larry used to live in the house and thinks that, you know, the only way to get back into the house is to extort this man of his money so that he has to leave so that he can move back in, which doesn't really make sense because he's poor. So we have Larry and Constance and Larry used to date for a very short period of time until Tate got in the way of everything and things just kind of went out of control from there. He is absolutely in love with her, and she wants absolutely nothing to do with him because he's a crust lord. The men in this show can trip on a knife, honestly. I could care less about him, and him. Now we have Moira and Constance, and we find out in the 80s, which I'll explain in the timeline behind me, that she killed her for sleeping with her husband, in which it is revealed later that he raped her, and he R-worded her, and she just didn't believe it was rape and just kind of shot her. So she's a ghost. She dies looking like this, but somehow when you're a woman, you see this. Which kind of makes sense because it's like the soul of the person, you know, a nice lady, you know, and also Frances Conroy slays. So then we have the next one that I kind of wrote down. This isn't every dynamic, by the way, it's just I have a couple more. We have Constance and Tate, mother and son. He absolutely hates her guts because he claims that his father left because he does not know that she killed him. He claims that his father left because she was a, quote, cocksucker. Now, we explore this in therapy a lot. We don't actually get to see them together a whole lot. There's a few scenes of them, but we really get to learn about their dynamic, especially through flashbacks as well. The rest I kind of just stuck down here as far as like the dynamics go. There's not many more to do with like the first 6 or like also Moira, but we have Chad and Pat, and they are together in a relationship. They're ghosts. They hate each other basically, but they're still together. We have Nora and Charles Montgomery. They also hate each other, and their son, who is a demon baby, Thaddeus. Thaddeus is a demon baby that Charles created. Hayden, who is Ben's lover, that mistress that he cheated on Vivian with, the police officer that Ben accuses Vivian of having sex with. We have Billie Dean Howard, played by Miss Sarah Paulson, and she comes in other seasons, but she is a legend. Just kind of shows up. And then we have Marcy the realtor, we have Adelaide, who is Constance's daughter, we have Travis, who is Constance's lover, and then we have these 2 little boys, which we'll get to in the pilot episode. So insequential. Everyone on this row is just like there, you know, and I've kind of just included them, but everyone in the top row is pretty important. Now that I have all the characters set up and kind of giving you some background, let's go back to where it all began. Okay, so we begin with these 2 absolute jokers down here, and they enter the house looking for destruction. They just start destroying the house for absolutely no reason. They run into jars of what look to be animal fetuses, baby limbs, and just a bunch of random stuff. The house is decrepit and just it looks like it hasn't been touched in years. This thing, which I said earlier is Nora and Charles's baby, comes out of nowhere and kills both of them. And so that's why I've used this image, just because it's, there's just something about it that I like, because they are annoying. So that's in 1978. Also, just a quick preface, like if you look it up online, there is a timeline on Wikipedia or like Wiki, but that timeline does not make any sense. And this is my video, so this is what I'm going with. October 30th, 1978, pilot, and then the event. So on all of these pre-timeline, so this is day 1 when the show actually like starts, when they move in. This is like the flashbacks, if that makes any sense. So I'll always say like the date, the episode that it occurred in, and then the event. These 2 die in the first scene. She, Adelaide, as a younger child, is just outside and warns them before they go in that they're going to die in there. Now this comes back around, and she says it later on. We jump to 2010, December 21st in the pilot. Ben gets caught cheating, Crust Lord, by Vivian, and is very upset about this and cuts his arm with a knife. Now, this is when we go into the intro of the show, like the intro song with all the characters and the cast. And let me tell you, the intros to this show are amazing and exquisite. So then we jump almost a year later to 2011 in August. I've put August 31st because they specifically reference certain things like falling on a Thursday or falling on a Wednesday. We know that it starts in fall of 2011 because that is when Violet starts school, and they specifically say it's the end of summer. So I just put it as August 31st, 2011 because that's easy. The Harmons take a tour of the murder house and decide to buy it. Now, it is Violet's decision first to buy it. These two are unsure, but she says that she'll take it once she sees the basement and realizes how creepy it is because she's a depressed teenage girl. Then we kind of jump a few days forward to day 5, September 4th, 2011. Constance introduces herself. Now, Constance is their next door neighbor. Constance reveals that she's always wanted to be a movie star and that having children kind of led her to a different life and she was never able to fulfill her actual dream. Adelaide, her child here, has Down syndrome. It's not actually said how old she is, but the audience is kind of led to believe that she's in her 30s, with the flashback taking place in 1978, and she is a full-grown adult in 2011. So they introduce themselves to Vivian, and I don't believe Violet is in this scene, but they later on meet. Ben eventually meets them as well, but in this first scene, I do believe it's just Vivian and Constance. Constance is just walking around their house, having a good old time, when Vivian hears like, "What are you doing in my house?" And Adelaide says,
"You're gonna die in here."
Miss Girl here is just giving an Oscar-worthy performance in every single scene she's in, especially in this first one. Later on, we see Vivian in the attic, and because she hears a noise, I think, she goes up there and she finds a costume, and it's a rubber costume used for what I can only describe on this platform as playtime. This costume it shows up a lot throughout the series, and I didn't put an image on here, but this is what it looks like. So she finds this costume and, you know, she's absolutely horrified of it at first because it does look creepy because it's just like propped up in the corner, like it looks like someone's already in it. She asks Ben to throw it away. The next day, we meet Crust. September 5th, Tate begins therapy. They have a therapy session. Tate reveals that he has fantasies of killing people in his class. Right, okay. Ben is a little distraught by this and he's concerned. So then later we cut to Violet in the bathroom and she is cutting herself. Crust Lord here walks up to her and that she's doing it wrong and that she needs to cut vertically if she wants to see any results. Basically, this relationship is a Tumblr 2012, 2014. It's a historical event, let's just put it like that. So yeah, all the edgelords on Tumblr loved these two, and this is where it all began. She wanted to end it all, and he wanted to kill his classmates. That same night, we see Ben sleepwalking, and he turns on the fireplace downstairs and just kind of watches it. Vivian comes downstairs and is like, "What are you doing?" And he's just like sleepwalking and dreaming. So then we cut to day 7 the next day. Vivian is outside hanging sheets and Moira here comes over to her and says hello. Now, she is a ghost, as we've established earlier. She comes over and says that she's been the housekeeper here for years and she offers to work for her for at least a part-time position. Vivian says that she would love some help around here, but she thinks that she has it. However, Moira basically says that you're not doing a good job enough to keeping this house clean. Now, this is when Miss Vivian hires Miss Moira and their relationship begins. And they walk inside and Mr. Ben here walks in as well and sees her. He is absolutely infatuated by this woman. Vivian doesn't really pick up on it at all. And it's one of the most just annoying parts of the season. Like, how do you just not see that your husband wants to fucking cheat on you? So they see 2 different women down here, and I've decided the way I've broken down the board, these 3 are our family up here, and then each of them have their own connection to someone else who has lived in the house before. Ben's connection is Larry, Vivian's connection is Constance, and Violet's connection is Tate. This Moira is seen by Tate and Vivian, and this Moira is seen by Ben. That's the way I've broken down the board. I think it makes sense to me. If it doesn't to you, this isn't your video. Moira is hired and she says that she would like to start within a few days, but Vivian says, "No, it's fine, you can start tomorrow." Day 8, September 7th, Ben catches Moira playing a game, and Ben has to go play his own game in the corner and cry because he's a sad little crusty little man. Looking in the window is Mr. Larry Harvey here, watching him playing a game alone. These two, oh my goodness. Okay, so then Addie comes in the house again. She is just causing a ruckus and she is just running around opening drawers. Or are they opening themselves? Vivian says to get out of her house and that it's not her house and she's just not welcome. Constance then walks in and basically tells her to never touch her kid again because Vivian made Adelaide promise to never come in without being invited again, and she was like squeezing her arm. These two are already kind of like frenemies a little bit, and she has been told to stay out of the house, which she does not do. Day 13, we jump forward a couple of days. It's September 12th. Ben catches Violet and Tate hanging out after their session together. Big drama. It's big drama. This man right here does not want these two to be together. That day after their session, he tells him to leave her alone because she has enough problems. Again, they don't follow this rule. Day 16, so another few days later, it's September 15th now. Ben reports Tate to the police. However, nothing really comes of that storyline. Moira seduces Ben, tries to seduce him. Violet catches them. She sees Frances Conroy as Moira, and Ben sees Alexandra Breckenridge as Moira. So obviously she's a little concerned, because why would her dad be literally cheating on his wife with an old lady with a feather duster? Again, nothing really comes of this. We don't ever see a conversation between the two, but it's definitely interesting to see her perspective on this event and his perspective on this event. So then we move on to day 17, that is September 16th, 2011. Violet gets into a fight while at school for smoking on school premises, and this woman right here, I don't remember her name. She is Regina George. She is telling her that she doesn't belong at this school, all these different things. There's drama. So she gets into a fight. She's a little bloody at the top of her head. So then she comes home. Ben and Vivian are fighting. They are having a disagreement. Ben is upset that he is doing all he can on his end, and she is upset that he just can't really own up to what he's done, and is just like, you know, they're fighting because he basically wants that ping, and she is not willing to give it up. And it's been a year since they have done that, which I did not need to know. And if you look on the official wiki timeline, it is on the timeline, and that is embarrassing for American Horror Story fans that we put that on the timeline, the official timeline. You guys are gross. So then a few hours later, Vivian is tending to Violet's wound, and they have a nice little heart-to-heart where Violet isn't being a total bitch. Then later, for bed, the Rubber Man, as it becomes known, a ghost in the rubber costume, if you will, comes over to Vivian, and Vivian is just assuming it's all Mr. Ben right here asking for round 2, when it is not. It is in fact a ghost doing things to Miss Vivian. I'm just gonna go ahead and spoil it now because it is on the timeline. Mr. Tate here is in the costume. Now, he is dating her daughter, and he all of a sudden is in cahoots with her. And that is just all different kinds of levels of messed up. Oh my goodness, it's disgusting. So within a 24-hour period, less than that, probably within 12 hours, these two have both laid down next to Miss Vivian. That becomes very important later on. Day 20, so September 19th, Tate and Violet decide to scare Violet's bully. I think her name's Leah. They decide to scare her in the murder house. She comes and is scared by Tate and Mr. Thaddeus here. She leaves. She claims she's the devil and leaves. So then, later, Ben is on a run because that's just what he does. He just runs. And he's being chased by this crust over here. Excuse me. He is chased by this crusty man over here. He's been watching him for weeks at this point. He is concerned that the house is going to turn him against his family because we learned that that is what he did. He killed his family. Right, yeah, okay. Then Ben is like, you're crazy, stay away from me, leave me alone. Day 23, a few days later, September 22nd, 2011, Vivian tells Benjamin right here that she wants Indian food. Now, this is important because Indian food is the only food that she likes when she's pregnant. This is interesting. You don't know whose baby it is. Is it Mr. Tate over here? Or is it Mr. Benjamin right here? And that is the pilot episode of American Horror Story. I'm not gonna go in depth with all the episodes like I did with this one, because with this one, just so much happens, babe, so much happens. So I decided to go a little in depth with this one, but that is the pilot episode. a lot is set up. You don't really see many of the people down here besides like Adelaide and Leah and then obviously Thaddeus and the twins, but you don't see many of like these ghosts yet because they come in later episodes and you learn a lot more about them. But yeah, let's go on into episode Dose. All right, now we begin episode 2. We've added some extra days onto here. We begin in 1968, which is the oldest flashback up until this point. Keep in mind, the R. Franklin murders begin. He murders 2 nurses that are living in the house at the time because the house is being used as like a nursing school at the time, I believe it is. And he drowns one of them in the bathtub and then stabs the other one downstairs, and she bleeds out and expires. They both become ghosts and we'll see them later on. I didn't give them a picture because they're not important enough to be on the board. Basically, that's just like an interesting little flashback to kind of give us an insight into how many murders have actually happened here at the murder house. At this point, the flashbacks are kind of just used to give us insight into the house, and it's not necessarily about the characters yet, which it will become about later. So yeah, episode 2 then moves on to day 32, October 1st. So it's about a week, a little bit more than a week after the pilot ends. Leah and Violet have become friends now, and they meet at an abandoned skate park. Or I don't think it's abandoned, they actually are there with like actual people skating. So they are basically talking. Violet is even scared about what she saw in the basement, Mr. Thaddeus Infantata right here. And she basically at the end of that episode, I think I forgot to explain or like mention, she tells Tate to go away because she's scared of like what happened. And Tate's like, I thought you said you wanted to scare her. So basically both of them have bonded now over their shared traumatic event in the basement with the demon baby. So they just have a nice little meeting because now they're friends. 2 days later, October 3rd, Ben has a session with a woman named Bianca. Now I have not put her on the board because she's not important. Basically, this woman is scared of getting cut in half because she said that she has a dream about like elevator, like cutting her in half. It's a fake story. She is just there to scout the house because she's a part of a team of people that like recreate famous LA murders. So she's scouting the house, kind of like looking for exits and entrances, turning off all the phones, all that stuff. And then we see Ben on the phone with Constance. Ben is calling her in regards to Tate and his relationship with Violet, and he says it's probably best if Ben does not see Tate anymore because he doesn't see that their relationship is appropriate. So then the next day on October 4th, Ben then gets a call from Hayden. Now we meet Hayden later, but that is the woman he had an affair with, and she basically tells him to come to Boston because she needs him and there's something important awaiting, and we will find that out, I believe, later on in the episode. Day 36, so October 5th, the next day, Ben flies out to Boston and he claims to Vivian that it's for a patient that had a mental episode that he needs to go out, sort her out basically. But really he's lying because he's a crust. Constance tries to poison Violet because Vivian put her hands on Adelaide in the first episode. The Harmons are invaded, and what I mean by the Harmons, I mean these two, because this crusty is not in the house at the time of the invasion. They're invaded by Bianca, another girl, and some other guy that want to recreate the murders from 1968 on the timeline. However, both of them end up dead, and then Bianca, she basically escapes because she eats the poisoned cupcake that Violet did not eat. So these two go through a traumatic experience. They escape. Basically, the ghosts kill the invaders. While this is all going on, however, Ben is in Boston with Miss Hayden right here. Now, she is manipulative and she is just a snake. All she wants to do is rip Ben away from her. That is her entire character. She just wants Ben for herself. Now, she is also going to school to become a psychiatrist, I don't remember. And he was her teacher, we find out in this, which that is just another reason to hate Mr. Ben Harmon right here. Krusty. She's just manipulative. She tells him that he can't answer his phone, and this is why he misses the invasion and why he is not there for them in their time of need. Now, he is in Boston because she is pregnant at the same time as Vivian, and she wants his emotional support while going to get an abortion. Something does not add up there. Why does he need to be there for that? I don't know. So then the next day, Ben returns home to Los Angeles to these two, and the police are questioning all three of them about what went down, and they basically explain that Bianca ended up basically cut in half because Tate swung an axe at her or something. I don't know. She does not come back, Miss Bianca. She does not come back. The police are questioning all three of them, however, and Ben returns and says that he had a patient, and Vivian here is not having a single bit of it. So that's episode 2. Alright, we move on to episode 3 titled Murder House. We begin in 1983. Constance sees the whole ordeal with Moira getting R-worded by her husband, Hugo. The men in the show are just awful. In reaction to this, she offs both of them and becomes a single mom. So that's the flashback for this episode. Then we pop down to the present, day 47. October 16th, Ben and Vivian are arguing about moving because since their little invasion, Vivian does not want to stay in the house any longer, and Ben says that they cannot afford it. And she says,
well, that's not a good enough answer. Get us out.
And so basically they hold a meeting with Marcy, the realtor down here, and she says, I don't really know what else you want me to do. So that meeting doesn't go very well. So then we jump down a few days to October 25th, day 56. Ben has a session with my girl, Miss Adina Porter down here from the 100. Her name is Sally in this. Her whole character trait is that she's boring, and she says that she memorized her husband's entire football team and like his favorite everything. Ben is incredibly bored by her as well and ends up actually falling asleep during his session with her. Ben basically blacks out the whole conversation, and we see later he wakes up and he's missing his tape recorder that he has during his sessions, and Miss Moira over here claims that she didn't touch it at all. During this, Moira is incredibly seductive with Ben, and he is just not having it. He's really trying to resist the urge. Moira is incredibly insistent. This time, Vivian walks in on them, and Ben claims that she came on to him, but Miss Vivian is like, she's an old lady, she would not do that. But Ben is like, I'm confused. The whole thing is just, it's giving very much first episode when Violet saw this whole interaction, but here they actually talk about it. And she said that she's happy to still work with them as long as we don't ever speak about this again. And Vivian and everybody just kind of ignores it. Honestly, it goes away. Then we move on to day 58, October 27th. Hayden has returned from Boston, and she is here to confront Ben for leaving her whilst she was getting an abortion and she was left alone in the hospital. Ben here obviously had a family emergency and had to leave, but she doesn't really buy that, and she says, I'm more important than your family. And while this is all happening, Vivian is out. Miss Vivian finally gets a chance to see what happened in this house. We learn that the house was built in 1922 by the doctor to the stars at the time, Mr. Charles Montgomery. And his wife is just kind of fed up with the whole thing. She had to move all the way over to Los Angeles from Philadelphia with their baby. So she is upset that they have had to move their whole life across the country. We find out that he's addicted to drugs. The two argue, and it's a very fun scene, and Miss Lily Rabe is an icon. She suggests that they do some alternative methods to earn money, in which this kind of results in a string of abortions that are illegal at the time, done by Mr. Charles in their house. That's kind of the start of like the death that happens here at this house. It's all because of him, basically, doing these illegal abortions. It's not really said how many abortions there are, but this is kind of what creates the hellmouth of Murder House and why it kind of traps the souls that live here. So then we're back to the present day. Vivian ends up having some spotting in her pants from this whole story because she's quite literally shook to the core about the whole thing. She's like, I'm living in that house, babes. So she ends up going to the doctor with Ben. The doctor here basically reassuring that it wasn't a miscarriage, she was just having some spotting from stress. So then the next day, day 59, October 28th, Vivian is greeted at the door by who? Nora, as a ghost. So we find out that she died in the house. She gives Nora a tour of the house, and Nora is absolutely in love with the place like she's never seen it before. She's in love with the Tiffany fixtures and the wood, and she's going on about all the stuff, how the glass windows match the color of her eyes. It's a fun scene. She's fun. Then she kind of just disappears on her once she sees the kitchen, and Vivian is like, okay, that was weird. So then that same day, Sally is found, and Ben can rest assured that nothing happened. even though he's kind of been paranoid that he did something to her for the whole episode. Hayden then confronts Ben about the fact that they were supposed to meet at like a bar or something the day before, but Ben stood her up. It's a whole thing because he's been blacking out. So she is on her manipulative game, just saying, I want us to work out. Basically, I want to have this baby. They go outside because he's like leading her out of the house. Mr. Man right here comes around the corner with a shovel and kills her on the spot. She dies on the property, and so does the baby. Ben then the next day builds a gazebo over her body. Yeah, that about covers episode 3. Larry kills Ben's mistress, and therefore Ben is in debt / being extorted by Larry. Larry is trying to extort him because if anything came out about her, he's the one to blame. He's her mistress. So now Larry has leverage over Ben, and that becomes important later. All right, now I've included episode 4 and 5 as one because it's Halloween part 1 and part 2. The majority of both episodes take place within like October 30th and October 31st with an aftermath afterwards, and then obviously a couple flashbacks. In 2010, October 29th, so a few days before Halloween, we see Chad and Pat preparing for Halloween. They're having a Halloween party. They are the two who lived in the house before the Harmons did. He's all up in arms about apples and what kind of apple they should have for the like Bob for Apples. Kills both of them. Then we go into the intro, basically. So then we go into the present. It is October 30th, the day after Ben builds the gazebo. The Harmons have another meeting with Marcy, and she suggests that they have an image problem and that they need to have like a fun-filled Halloween to kind of get the public's opinion changed on the murder house if they want to sell. They buy costumes. She offers to help them with the rebranding of the house by hiring fluffers, who end up being these two lads over here. So these two show up, claim to be the fluffers, and so they carve pumpkins together, they decorate the house together. Outside of the house, we see Travis and Adelaide bonding, they're reading books together, and Constance accuses Travis of trying to sleep with Adelaide here. Or I guess really accuses Adelaide of trying to sleep with Travis. Ben is then confronted again by Larry for the $1,000 extortion money that he's trying to get out of him. Ben is just kind of ignoring the fact and just really not processed the fact that Hayden has died, and Larry's just trying to use that to his advantage. Then Ben and Tate have a session. Now they haven't had a session I think in a few weeks because Ben canceled any future sessions with Tate with Constance in, I believe, episode 2. Ben asks Tate about why he was there during the invasion and why he helped Vivian and Violet escape from the killers. And Tate just says that he was throwing rocks at Violet's window like a creep and then just walked in because the door was open. Yeah, sure. Okay. So then Vivian has a security system installed by Luke, the police officer, and he's very charming, he's very nice. You can see Vivian likes him. Not much really comes of their relationship. It's really just more of like a friendly flirting kind of situation. Violet is found by Addie, who wants to be a pretty girl, just like Violet is for Halloween, and Violet is happy to do her makeup and her hair. Later that night, Addie goes back to her house and Constance is having none of this. So she forces her into a closet to look at herself in the mirror. Later that night, we see Violet and Tate with a Ouija board. Tate tells Violet the scary story of how this house came to be. So in 1926, up here, October 23rd, one of Charles Montgomery's patients, their boyfriend, kills Mr. Thaddeus right here, kind of get revenge on the whole abortion situation that Charles was involved in. And he completely dismembers him, basically just body parts at that point. Body is returned to him in jars, and which he begins sewing them back together because he's on drugs and he doesn't know what he's doing. And she is just kind of horrified by this whole thing. The next day, October 31st, Vivian is just upset because Chad is having none of her costume and just thinks that it's very cheap Walmart kind of costume.
Walmart version of Justin Bieber? Aww. I wish I could tell you what they sell at Walmart, but I've never been there. Never shopped at Walmart.
And so she kicks him out and says that he's a horrible fluffer and just get out of my house, basically. She then again is having pain with her pregnancy, and so she's rushed to the hospital. Later that night, Adelaide is trick-or-treating with a bunch of mean girls. Basically, she's not really with them. She's just kind of around them. She runs out into the street and is hit by a car, in which she dies in the middle of the road. Constance comes out and tries to get her to the house beforehand so that she can expire on the property, so she's not, gone forever. We also see Moira on her own side quest this night, because on Halloween night, one thing that's kind of set in stone is ghosts can leave the premises of the murder house. Few of them leave. Hayden leaves, Nora leaves, we see her returning. These two leave to go do their own little things. But Moira goes to the hospital and Mercy kills her mother. So Tate and Violet end up leaving the murder house to go to the beach for the night and are confronted by these teens down here. They claim that they know Tate, but Tate does not know them. He's like, I don't recognize any of you babes. What are you doing here? And Violet's just like, this is not a fun prank, like, we're leaving. So they leave, and they're basically chased all night by these goons. When Vivian and Ben come home, Violet is gone, and they're really confused because Violet was in the house at the end of episode 4, taunted by Larry, who is trying to extort Ben of money. We find out that Violet is actually just at the beach, and these two call her and find out that she's safe. Ben then sees Larry lurking around the house and he attacks him and basically tells him to leave him alone. Then we see Miss Hayden, the ghost of Hayden, taunting Vivian. Basically tries to kill her dog in like a joking manner, and it's a whole thing. Vivian is just completely upset by this, obviously. Hayden here just wants Miss Vivian to know the truth about Boston. She calls Ben in, and Ben has to tell Vivian the truth about what happened in Boston and that Hayden here is pregnant, was pregnant before she died. The alarm system is triggered. Luke takes Hayden into custody. She's arrested. However, she comes back to the house because she's dead and her spirit has to. All the ghosts return. We see Nora returning. We see Chad and Pat return. We see Moira return. We see Tate return. And we see the teenagers from before that were chasing them go back to where they're from. And we'll explore that later in the next episode. But that's the Halloween 2-part episode. The episode basically ends with Ben moving out because Vivian has had enough of his lies when she found out that he was in Boston to see Hayden. So he packs his bags and leaves, and that's the end of the episode. All right, so episode 6 begins in 1994. We see part 1 of this kind of joint flashback. Tate is seen unaliving 15 students at his school. Disgusting. 6 of which are pictured down here, and that is what was happening in the Halloween episode. They were just chasing him, trying to get him to admit what he had done, but he doesn't remember what he did because he is a ghost. He is then shot by the police. Then we move on to the present day. It's day 64, so November 2nd. Constance introduces Billy Dean Howard to Violet, who has just recently found out that Tate did in fact do what he did in 1994. Billy Dean Howard basically explains that she's a medium, she can communicate with the ghosts. So day 65, November 3rd, Ben meets with Cam. Cam is scared of urban legends like Bloody Mary, that kind of thing, but this show has its own version called Piggy Piggy, which is basically like if you stand in the mirror and then you say his name 3 times, he comes out and like kills you. It's this whole thing. This guy, Cam, is just scared of that happening, and Ben is just, his whole point this episode, literally the only thing he ever does this episode is try to get this guy to get over his fear. By the end of the episode, the guy dies. He gets killed by these robbers. It's insequential to the plot. Basically, that's all Ben is doing this episode. We then see Vivian, Constance, and Moira chatting about pregnancy. Constance offers Vivian some offal. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's basically an animal's pancreas and heart and just other organs. It's disgusting. But Vivian eats it. Moira makes it just the way that she did with Constance when she was Constance's maid. So then the next day, day 66, Vivian goes to the doctor to get tested, or rather get her baby tested for like Down syndrome and all these different kinds of like conditions that the baby could have, because she is one paranoid mother. So then we jump forward a few days. It is now day 73, November 11th. Violet takes a bunch of sleeping pills and she dies. We don't find out that she actually is dead for like 5 or 6 more episodes. On screen, we see Tate saving her, and then we see day 74. Vivian meets with Angela, who is not pictured. Basically, in an earlier episode, I believe it was the Halloween episode, they went to the doctor and she saw a baby with hooves. She basically collapsed and quit her job because of this. So she meets with her in the church. She's going on crazy. So this is what leads Vivian to be all paranoid and stuff about the Down syndrome and everything. Billie Dean Howard again meeting with Constance, and she talks to Adelaide for Constance, and Constance has a conversation with Adelaide through Billie Dean Howard, and it's a nice moment to give Constance some closure from the whole thing. So that basically ends the episode. Alright, so episode 7 begins with a flashback to 1994 where Larry is now dating Miss Constance. It's after he has left Lorraine. They are dating. We find out that Constance has another son, Beauregard. Beauregard down here, you can't really see him very well. He was born with some kind of condition. It's said that he died in his sleep from the inability to breathe. He kills him. She basically wants him to kill him because she doesn't want him to suffer anymore, and the neighbors were like complaining basically that he was making a lot of noise. About a week, almost a week after the last episode ended with day 80, so November 18th, Ben and Vivian find out that they're having twins while at the doctor, and it's very shocking news for both of them, especially with that they tried to get pregnant. It didn't end very well. They had a miscarriage, which led to Ben cheating. So this episode kind of centers around this guy named Joe Eskandarian. He's not really pictured here, but he's a potential buyer for the Harmons and their house. Marcy finds him. She gives him a tour. He flirts with Moira right here, and they get into some pretty interesting games upstairs in Miss Violet's room later. Right away, he's very interested in the house and he wants to kind of tear it all down. This excites Moira because that means that she'll be free. She tries everything in her power to get him to sign on to be the next buyer. And then, while Ben is out, the open house is still going on for I think another 2 or 3 hours at this point. Larry shows up and asks for a tour of the house. At this point, Vivian has never met Larry, so she offers a tour to the house. Marcy, however, is very weary of him. She brings out a gun, threatens to shoot him if he tries anything. He is a creep. Then that night, Vivian has a dream / a vision of the Rubber Man, who obviously R-worded her in episode 1, and she doesn't really suspect that it wasn't Ben yet. The two have never had a conversation about it, but she doesn't really suspect that it wasn't him, which, like, girl, if someone like comes into your house and you think it's your husband, I feel like I would know my husband's body. That night, Violet is confronted by both of her parents about her depression. Now, Violet is a ghost at this point, and we don't know that. The viewers don't know that. Neither do the parents. Neither does Violet, to be honest. No one knows. She just hasn't left her house in a few weeks. She hasn't gone to school, so her parents are very concerned about that. And she basically says, you guys have enough problems of your own to worry about. So then the next day, it is day 81, November 19th. Moira seduces Joe, again, not pictured because he made no impact. Later in the episode, we see Ben intruding Larry's home for a change. Ben basically is there to tell Larry to leave his family alone once Larry showed up at the open house and kind of freaked out Vivian. Ben says that he looked up Larry's story and realized that it wasn't as accurate as he was letting on, and that Miss Lorraine in 1994, in July, so a few months before we see Larry killing Beauregard in the first flashback of the episode, Larry dumps Lorraine, who then burns herself and the children alive in the house, and it wasn't Mr. Larry all along, it was Miss Lorraine. So back in the present day, Vivian and Marcy take another tour on the Eternal Darkness tour because last time she ran off, so she wants to get the full story because this house is just not selling and she wants to know why. In the flashback, we see 1926, Charles has fully resurrected, in some sense, his son as Thaddeus, aka the Infantata, and that is what is created. Nora is just in complete shock and honestly disgusted by this. She goes upstairs and
Kills the thing,
then goes
kills him,
and then
kills herself.
and then back in the present, it is day 82, so November 20th. Constance shows up in the house and meets with Larry, who sent her flowers, which gross. This is the first time I think in like 20 years that they have seen each other, maybe 30 years. Constance is in absolute disgust by his presence, as she should be. He's crusty, he's disgusting. He's offering her basically once, because he wants to buy the house from the Harmons, which is just insane. He's offering her a chance to be reunited with her family in the murder house. However, she says no because she doesn't want to be with him because he's disgusting. However, Larry does tell Constance Joe's plan to tear the whole thing down, which would free all the spirits and free her from not only her son, but her other son in the process. And then Tate and Violet are hanging out in the attic, or I think in the basement, one of the two, and they find old relics and like heirlooms of people who have lived in the house. They find a picture of Nora and Charles, who built the house. The next day, day 83, so November 21st, Constance goes to Joe's home and they have a whole chat about like the history of Los Angeles and all this stuff, and how people like Joe like to build over the history of, you know, certain old houses like the murder house. And Constance is just having none of it lately. She does not like this man. She does not like this man, and she's trying to persuade him not to buy the house, or if he does buy the house, to not build over it. Then the next day, November 22nd, Tate has a session with Ben, and he claims that he's cured and he doesn't have any fantasies anymore. Liar. Constance, after receiving the news that Joe is very serious about buying the house, goes to the house to say goodbye to Tate and Beauregard. And she's just not having a good day, this woman. She's confronted by Moira, who basically claims that Joe is going to set her free and build her a swimming pool. And Miss Constance right here is having none of that. She's saying, you won't be free. You're just like, that's not going to happen. Like, he's just going to build over the whole thing and tear it down. She recruits Moira to kill Mr. Joe Eskandarian because of her persuasive abilities. Violet then shows a picture of Nora to Vivian, who claims that she literally saw Nora here the other day in episode 3. This confuses Vivian because obviously she doesn't believe in ghosts, so she's just she doesn't understand what's going on. And at the end of the episode, Moira kills Joe, thus saving the house from being sold. All right, so episode 8 opens in 2011, just a few months before the series started. It's said spring 2011, just a few months before the Harmons move in, so I've just put March 1st. Tate comforts Nora, who we see down in the basement crying because she's a very confused spirit and she's crying out for her son, whom she does not remember killing. One thing about Tate, he has mommy issues, so he is just willing to do absolutely anything, and I mean anything, to get the women in his life to be happy. He says that he will get her baby when a new family moves in. Day 94 on our timeline, December 2nd, Marcy says that Joe Eskandarian, who we saw in the last episode get offed by Moira, is not answering her calls because he's dead, honey. He's not alive anymore. Vivian is very upset about this because all she wants is to sell her house, and she was over the moon at the fact that there was a potential buyer, and she kind of blames Marcy for letting this one go. In 2010, we see a flashback of Chad buying the Rubberman costume at an adult shop. He buys it in order to get Patrick to be more interested in him because they are in a point in their relationship when things are just not clicking, babes. He is in love with someone he met online, and Chad is obviously upset about that, so he buys the costume in order to get Patrick to be interested in him again. But we see later on, as we saw in the Halloween episode, that the Rubberman kills both of them, and obviously we find out in this episode that it is Tate. We see Moira disposing of the bodies. So then day 101, it is December 9th, 2011. Hayden makes a deal with Nora. We saw in the first part of the episode, like the first scene, that she just wants her baby. That's all she wants. She's a confused spirit. She doesn't really know what's going on half the time. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't really even remember many of the characters that she has scenes with, but we see Hayden down there trying to comfort her as well. And she makes a deal with Nora that the babies that Vivian is having will be split by each of them, and that Ben's will be going to Hayden and Tate's will be going to Nora. Nora and Hayden have this deal, I guess, with Tate that the babies will be going to each of them. Hayden claims that Vivian won't be able to raise them because she will be in the nut house within a few days. Interesting, interesting. Okay, developments are made. So then we see throughout this episode, Hayden tries to drive Vivian mad. Day 102, the next day, Violet is confronted by Ben because Ben gets a call from the school that says that she hasn't been to school in 2 weeks, which doesn't really make sense because when you look at the timeline, she dies November 11th and it is currently December 10th. Basically an entire month has gone by, but it's stated in the show that it was 2 weeks, which that doesn't add up. Violet says that Ben has plenty of other issues to worry about, such as Vivian eating raw brains, because that's something that she's taken up since she's pregnant, and apparently it has a lot of health benefits. So then a few days later, December 15th, Vivian is convinced that it is her medication that is making her see things and hear things, but it's honestly really just Hayden. And so she confides to Moira about this, and Moira basically says it's not the medication, it's her husband. Vivian packs her stuff and tries to leave with Violet. Ben is no longer in the house at this point. He just works there throughout the day, so he's not there during this. But these two are once again invaded by the flops from episode 2, I believe it is, who tried to invade them so unsuccessfully. They show up in their car, they run back inside. The next day, Ben returns to the house. It is December 16th. Ben says he does not believe her story about the invasion and just thinks she's crazy. Violet backs up this story because she thought that Vivian didn't want to be thought of crazy, so she thought that they were lying to the police and saying that there was nothing going on. In turn, this makes everybody think that Vivian is just off her rocker. That night, or rather early in the afternoon, she has a meeting with Marcy, and during this meeting, she feigns illness, I guess, to get Marcy to go get her a glass of water. While distracted, she takes the gun from Marcy's purse. Basically, that night, Tate in the rubber man costume tries to go for round 2 on her, basically. Her medication obviously does play a role in this, so she's hallucinating part of it, but also some of it is real. The next thing we see is Vivian pull out the gun and shoot Ben, who runs in. Then it cuts to black. Later that night, we see Vivian talking to the police, claiming that she was being R-worded again by the same man in the costume, and no one believes her. No one believes her because no one knows it's Tate, and nobody really, like, there's no sign of forced entry. Ben just knows what he saw, and that's her acting hysterical, as he claims. So she's taken to a mental ward with her point of view on the whole invasion the night before, and then her point of view of this night, and then obviously the gunshot to Ben. So that's where episode 8 ends. This is the big episode that we learned Tate is the rubber man. Alright, so episode 9 begins in 1947 with Elizabeth Short, yes, that Elizabeth Short, arriving at the murder house for a consultation with a dentist, and she pays him with playtime because she doesn't have money because she's a struggling actress. She accidentally dies of the anesthesia because he used too much or something during the operation. Charles over here dismembers her. Dr. Curran takes her body, and basically this is what we know as the Black Dahlia murder. She's not pictured, however, because she's not that important in the story. Then we jump to day 113, so December 21st. Moira is again making advances on Ben, and Ben is strong-willed and says that he does not want any part of the advances that she makes. Later that episode, Constance and her boyfriend Travis are fighting. Constance is drinking a lot. She's just in a sour mood ever since her daughter Adelaide passed away. Obviously, she's grieving. He needs to give her some space and some time. Hayden and Travis having a little playtime of their own because Travis is trying to get back or I guess get even with Constance. I don't know. Hayden is trying to get back at Ben for not wanting to be with her and her crazy ass. The next day, day 114, December 22nd, Hayden's sister shows up at Ben's front door with a cop claiming to basically not have heard from Hayden in weeks. So she's just concerned because the last thing that Hayden said was that she was going out to LA to try to reconcile things with Ben and hasn't called her sister back. But Hayden shows up fine and dandy. She claims she's alive and happy and she's living here with Ben. All a bunch of lies. Hayden then leaves and Ben meets the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, and she is trying to have a session with him, trying to seduce him. I'm not exactly sure what that whole part was about. Ben is being seduced by Moira and the Black Dahlia. Ben gets a call from Dr. right here, and he finds out that the twins that Vivian is having have two different fathers. Not only is it, we don't know who the father is, it is now both of the twins have different fathers, and one of them is Tate's and the other one is Ben's. This kind of shook everybody to the core. Everybody was like, how is that even possible? But it's a real condition. It's a real actual thing in pregnancy. Like, you can technically get pregnant by two different men within a short period of time. It's very rare, but this is kind of the shake of the century. So then, after all of the advancements that Miss Moira is putting on Ben, Ben fires Moira. Later that night, Constance comes in the house and finds out through Moira that the twins that she's having, that Vivian is having, that would be, are not just Ben's, and one of them is Tate's. We have a good scene here with Tate and Constance, where Constance basically scolds Tate for his behavior, and it's actually a really interesting scene, and I like the dynamic here. I wish we had more scenes between them. I don't know why we don't. Basically, she is just going all mother on him, and he's just a sad, pathetic little man-child over here. So later that day, Ben goes to the hospital to visit Vivian, and he basically says that he knows that she cheated on him, when in reality that is not the case. Krusty over here is basically saying he won't lift a finger to get her out of this place. She's all doped up, so she doesn't really answer or reply or argue with him. Basically just leaves her there. We get a flashback to November 20th, 2010, where Ben meets Hayden, and we can see the beginning of their relationship. He is her teacher, which I think I mentioned earlier, and she is a student at in his class, I guess. Day 116, so this is actually Christmas Eve, but they don't actually say it. Ben officially ends it with Hayden because he is just not interested in her anymore, and this is kind of when Ben starts to have his little character arc, redeeming moment, but he's still crusty. He basically says, I'm not interested anymore, leave me alone. Hayden then claims that Luke was leaving the house as she was sneaking in one of the earlier episodes, and basically accuses Luke of being the other father. This leads Ben to believe that Luke is the other father of Vivian's twins. Travis and Constance reconcile, but then have another argument. Travis leaves and basically breaks up with her. He has another indiscretion with Hayden in the basement, and this leads to Hayden offing him because he wants to go back to Constance, and Hayden doesn't have anyone to go back to because, as I said earlier, Ben is done with Hayden. Travis is then cut up by Charles, the same way that Charles cut up the Black Dahlia. Larry moves the body to another part of town to be discovered, and the whole thing ends up being called the Boy Dahlia, so it's kind of like their whole take on the Black Dahlia. So then we have day 127, so January 4th. Constance visits Vivian in the psych ward, and she basically says that she believes her about the R-word story when no one else does. Ben, later on in the episode, then calls over Luke and accuses him of sleeping with his wife. He basically says that he would never do that, and he can't get anyone pregnant because he is, quote, shooting blanks. So Ben believes this and realizes that maybe it was the R-word. Don't know why it took him this long to figure that out, but yeah. Ben finally sees Moira as the older version of herself. This is a nice little story arc for Ben. He finally realizes what's important here, and that is his wife and his daughter, and he doesn't really get caught up as much in Moira and Hayden and the Black Dahlia kind of trying to seduce him all at once. Day 128, so January 5th, Billie Dean Howard has returned. She's meeting with Constance because Constance is concerned about what happens when a ghost and a human copulate. And basically, Billie Dean breaks it down and explains that basically nothing short of the Antichrist is coming. So that's real fun for everybody. Yeah, everyone's doing great. The Antichrist is coming. All right, so episode 10 begins October 4th, 1994. We see that Constance and Larry are now together like they were in, I believe, episode 7. They're having like a dinner together. Tate is having absolutely none of this. And so Tate basically accuses Larry of killing their brother a couple nights before. Constance is just like, you mind your manners. She's mothering. A couple days later, we see that this is the same day as when Tate shot up the school. So October 6th, Tate is actually, we find out, the one that burns Larry in his office, and it wasn't the wife right here. It was Tate all along. All right, so this is a pretty short episode in terms of like days. Not a whole lot happens. Day 129, so the day after episode 9 ends, January 6th, Ben visits Vivian, now believing her story, and tells her that he's gonna get her out of there within the next 2 days. Vivian finds out through Ben that one of the babies is not Ben's and one of them was the rubber man's. So she is just extra distraught, extra ready to get the hell out of Dodge and go back to Boston, because ever since they moved, everything's been absolutely awful. We then see Constance finding out that Travis is dead, and she identifies his body to the cops. Ben is then visited by a security guard for the school, or like a police officer from the school, of Violet's, saying that she's missed 16 days of school in a row, which that doesn't make sense for the timeline. In reality, it's been like a month and a half at this point. He basically says that she needs to go to school today or they are gonna go to court. They're gonna be in big girl trouble. She gets fully prepared to go to school. Tate keeps Violet from going to school because he knows the truth that she is dead. Can't obviously go anywhere once you're in the murder house. You're there forever. Things start to smell around the house. There are flies everywhere. So Ben hires a not pictured exterminator to come in. Absolute flop. He doesn't really do a whole lot. He just identifies that there is a smell and that there is flies, which we already knew. We see him down in the crawl space, and before he can really discover what's down there causing the smell, Krusty over here kills him because he doesn't want him to find out the truth that Violet is dead. Constance is accused by the police of killing Travis. She is their #1 suspect for his murder because they have unsolved cases of Hugo disappearing and Moira disappearing, so they want to try and pin it all on Constance when in reality it had nothing to do with Constance, at least this one. We see Larry enter the house to dispose of Travis's clothes that he hid in a wall. In this scene, Lorraine, his ex-wife, the ghost of Lorraine, confronts him for the first time since she died. She is basically disgusted by the sight of him and says, why are you trying to do this to like the family that's living here? Why are you trying to extort Ben and blame Constance for the murder when you did all of that? Like, this is all your fault. And so this basically causes Larry to turn himself into the police for the murder, even though he didn't have anything to do with it. He basically just goes down for the crime, kind of realizes that he needs to pay for everything he's done. Day 130, it is now January 7th. Tate attacks Ben because he is getting in the way of Violet and almost like leads to Violet finding out that she is a ghost on many occasions, and he just thinks that he is in the way. So he attacks him. Ben finds out that Tate is the rubber man. While he is passed out, Tate tries to get Violet to off herself with him, even though they're both already dead. He knows that she is dead, but she does not know that she is dead. She thinks he doesn't know that he's dead, but he knows. The whole time she thought that she was protecting him. In reality, it was really him protecting her from knowing the truth. She finds out that she's dead because she's running around in circles trying to run away from him because he's psychotic. Then he takes her down into the crawl space where the previous exterminator got exterminated. She finds her body. That is when she finally realizes that she is a ghost herself. Yeah, so he's behind bars. He's dead. She is now free from all accusations because this just clears up her name entirely. So yeah, that's episode 10. Alright, so the penultimate episode begins in 1984 when Tate is just a young lad, and this is when, a few months after Constance murders Moira and Hugo, Tate is just downstairs like all by himself and he encounters the Infantata. This is when we start to see Nora comforting him as a child, and this is exactly why Tate wants to give Nora the baby, because he feels that he owes her for kind of protecting him from the demon baby all those years. We jump to day 131, January 8th. This is a very important day in the timeline. At the beginning of the episode, Nora tells Tate that she is going to take Vivian's baby, no matter what Tate says, because Tate is now trying to say that Vivian can keep the baby because he doesn't want Violet to be upset at him now that they're all happy-go-lucky, now that they're both ghosts, and he can finally stop trying to protect her, and he just wants them all to live happily is what he wants now. But Nora is now saying, no, I'm still taking that baby. So that morning, Ben tries to get Violet to come with him to get Vivian out of the mental ward, but obviously Violet can't go anywhere because she's a ghost babe. She's been dead for weeks at this point. How do you not fucking see that? So she tries to go with him, but obviously ends up back in the house with Tate upstairs. We then see these two find these two in the supposed baby's room decorating for themselves, and they are claiming that they are taking the babies for themselves because they just want children. Their relationship is going to be reinvigorated and they're going to be much more happier with each other now that they have children because they can't have any. And Miss Vivian here is ready to burst. One thing about this, she has only been pregnant since the middle of September and it is now January. So it's only about 4 months since she's been pregnant, but because the babies are growing at such a rapid rate, she's basically ready to like give birth and for both of them to live on their own. However, it's said that one of them is stronger, the demon baby, the quite literal Antichrist. There is a huge concern that Vivian is going to give birth very, very soon. Both of them are just going to go straight home, pack their things, and fly back to Boston where they can be with Vivian's sister. We then see Constance confronting Chad and Pat in their attempt to steal the babies. And she says it's unnatural and that basically gay people should not be parenting children. One thing about Miss Constance, she is going to be homophobic and racist. Constance and Violet then get Billy Dean's help in trying to banish these two from the house. However, Violet tries this and it doesn't really work later on. Billy Dean basically tells them the story of the Roanoke colony, which, babes, that's season 6, lol. We can't get into that in this episode, but basically she tells them that the missing colony used Croatoan to like banish all the spirits from the camp that they were at. Vivian is released from the hospital and Ben drives her home, and once they get home, Vivian's water breaks. This is just a, oh my goodness, like as soon as she gets to the house, her water breaks. And I just find this very interesting because it could have broke at the hospital, but it breaks at the house as soon as she returns to the house. Constance finds her outside, you know, basically limping because she's already crowning. That baby is ready to come out and just joy to the world. So she is rushed inside. The events that ensue, insanity, pure insanity from here on out. Violet tells Ben that she is dead because Ben is just, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what's going on. All these people are appearing around him. Charles is assisting Vivian with this birth. Ben is just really confused. He's like, who are all you people? What's going on? The spirits help Vivian give birth. We then see the first baby dies at childbirth. That would be Ben's because obviously it's like 4 months old. Nora takes this baby for herself and just like disappears for a while. Then we see Violet going into the basement to try and banish these two. So he's basically burning the crib in the furnace downstairs that they were setting up and painting earlier in the episode. This is where Chad basically explains to Violet that one of the babies upstairs is Tate's, and this is when Violet finds out the whole thing. He's not going to be getting a break from her anytime soon after this. Upstairs, we see Tate's baby get born. Constance takes the baby to give him a bath. You can see she's very nurturing towards him because obviously that is her grandson. Vivian's not doing well. She is not doing well. We can see the mood in the room quickly switched from all happy-go-lucky from the baby being born to the doctor, Mr. Charles Montgomery over here, is concerned. The nurses are concerned. Ben's like, what is going on? She's bleeding out. Vivian does end up dying here on the couch. Her soul basically leaves her body. That's where the episode basically ends. She dies, one of the babies dies, and the other baby is taken by Constance. The first baby is taken by Nora. Oh, I forgot to mention, Violet then breaks things off with Tate because she found out that he basically R-worded her mother. So that's where we leave on the penultimate episode. It's quite a good episode. It's probably my favorite episode of the season. I think they did the birth scene very well. It takes up most of the episode, but it's done really well. But yeah, that's where we leave off in episode 11. Alright, so episode 12, the finale, begins August 20th, 2011. So just a week, about a week and a half before the events of episode 1 take place, Vivian is upset at Ben. Their therapy that they've been taking for 6 months has not been working. Ben, however, is super excited because he found this house online. He thinks that it could be a fresh start for them. And Vivian at first is hesitant, but eventually agrees to take a tour of the house. It's out in LA. That is what sets this whole thing into motion, and we finally see her agree to move out west with him. Little did she know that in 6 short months, or less than that, she would end up dead in that house. And that is where the episode begins. Day 134, so January 11th, so just 3 days after Ben was left alone in the house and Vivian died, Violet is dead. The only person that is alive here is Ben and the child. So January 11th, we see Ben go over to Constance's, who has Michael. He wants the baby because it's, you know, it is technically still his child because it is Vivian's child and he was her husband while she was alive, so it makes sense that he would like to raise him. At this point, Vivian has transitioned into a ghost. Her and Moira have become very close, now more equal than, you know, employer and employee. In this, we see Ben with the baby. He leaves his keys, a bunch of money, the alarm code for like the alarm at the house. He leaves just a bunch of stuff behind, and we see that he is preparing for suicide in the house so that he can be with Vivian and his daughter Violet again, who have made a pact to not show themselves to him, in an attempt to get him to leave the house with baby Michael, because they do not want a baby to grow up here. You know, it's no place for a child. Ben basically just wants to end it all in order to be reunited with them. Vivian finally shows herself to him in order to convince him to leave. So he actually packs his stuff back up and is ready to go when he is stopped by Hayden and the invaders from episode 2, who take baby Michael from Ben and they hang him and orchestrate it as if it was a suicide. Later that day, Constance shows up. She goes and finds the baby with Hayden, and with the help of Travis, he helps Constance get the baby back from Hayden. So that's a nice like little end to their little thing, is him helping Constance get her baby back. It's a nice little redemption for him and a nice way for her to say goodbye to him. Now that she has the baby, she takes him and goes to live in her house and doesn't really come in here unless she wants to like say hi to her kids. You know, she just wants to raise the baby away from the murder house. So now this is the point where I've stopped with the like day 134, day 133. That's like the last part in the timeline that's worthy of like getting a day, because that's like the main story is ended. So around a month later, February 6th, the Harmons drive out the new owners of the house that show up. I believe they're called the Ramoses. We get to learn about their personalities. Violet is friendly with the son. They basically drive them out in an attempt to keep families away from this wretched, evil house because they don't want to see any more death here. Which, good on them, because they're the only spirits that actually want to do that, seeing as though other spirits just want to, like, kill people. So, assumedly around this time, about a month again afterwards, I just put it on the same day, so around February 6th, Constance is in a meeting with the police. They are questioning her about what went on with her next door neighbors, if Violet has been seen or the other Harmon baby has been seen anywhere, because I guess the police still haven't found Violet's body, so she's still believed to be alive. Constance claims that she just ran off with the baby. In reality, the baby is in her closet. She's just keeping the police off of her at all times. In March 2012, so Tate asking for redemption from Ben, because obviously Ben is not happy at Tate with everything that went on. Obviously he attacked him, he R-worded his wife and manipulated his teenage daughter, and the whole thing is basically his fault this whole season. Everything that happens to this family is mostly his fault. So Tate is seeking redemption with Ben, and Ben basically says the only thing that can do that is your actions. But Tate's like, okay, well, can we still like talk? And Ben says, well, I'm not your therapist anymore, but I guess we can still chat if you want. And it's a nice way to kind of end off their relationship. It makes sense for Tate's resolution to kind of come in the form of Ben. December 2012, Vivian, Violet, Ben, and Moira are celebrating Christmas, and they're a big happy family. Vivian has finally got Ben's child from Nora down in the basement, because Nora decided that she didn't want to be a mother, even though obviously she spent most of the season trying to get Vivian's child from her. So she just kind of realizes that she's not fit to be a mother. Ben, Vivian are now happy together, and they are parenting their new child. Violet is now happy that she is no longer having to deal with the likes of Krusty over here. If the episode ended here, it would be a nice way to kind of cap off the Harmon's story. There is one more scene. January 3rd, 2015, so 3 years after the events of the death of Vivian and the birth of Michael and the other baby. We see Constance at her hairstylist. She is telling the story of how she came to be in charge of Michael, and basically a nice like long take for Jessica Lange to kind of say goodbye to the season, and it's kind of like the stamp on her character. And then we get one more scene of her returning home to Michael in a pool of his nanny's blood. The child is indeed the Antichrist. The last thing she says is, now what are we gonna do with you? And that is a wrap on Murder House. The amount of Scotch tape I had to go through to do this is absolutely criminal. Oh my goodness, and at one point, I had to absolutely retape about a third of the board because some of the dates were wrong. Yeah, also the marker, I know it's awful. It's, there's a couple errors, like as far as it not being straight. But you know what? Overall, I am proud of this. And this was quite the experience. It's quite big. I don't know where I'm gonna put it. This belongs in a museum. This is art. This is quite literally, oh my goodness, this was so much fun. That wraps this video. Overall, I'm just gonna give a couple final thoughts on the season. I would genuinely give this somewhere around a 7 to a 7.5 out of 10 in terms of American Horror Story. I think the seasons definitely get way better as the show goes on, but this is a nice starting place. I think the characters in this one are interesting enough. I don't think there's a main character here that isn't interesting. In particular, I find Ben's story to be interesting, even though he's crusty and gross. I think his story is probably one of the best here. Vivian, I find interesting enough. Wish we would have gotten a little bit more of a character from her, because she's kind of just known as like the granola mom, as I said earlier. Like, she doesn't have much more character trait to her. Obviously, Constance is the star here. She just steals every scene she's in. As far as like the side characters go that I really love Moira, as it's been documented. When these two have scenes together, it's incredible. As much as I hate Hayden, I think her name's Kate Mara, she does an amazing job. But yeah, I think everybody here did a really good job. Cast is stellar. That wraps up Murder House. Hopefully I will see you soon for Asylum Babes.